The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy. 847 different alien species had sent their best diplomats to this emergency meeting. The chamber stretched for miles with floating platforms holding representatives from across the galaxy. Each platform glowed with a different color, showing which star system each delegate came from. Ambassador Veltar stood at the center podium. His crystal body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. He had called this meeting, and now all eyes were on him. The Zephyrian Empire had been one of the first to encounter humans 3 years ago. Since then, everything had gone wrong. "Fellow council members," Veltar began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, "we face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history. The humans continue to ignore every diplomatic protocol we have established over 10,000 years of peaceful civilization." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. On one floating platform, the insect-like delegates from the Hive Collective clicked their mandibles in worry. Nearby, the gaseous beings from the Nebula Consortium flickered with concern. "Show them the reports," called out Ambassador Crix from the Stellar Federation. Her 4 arms gestured impatiently at the main display screen. The holographic display came to life, showing star maps of human territory. Red dots marked human fleet positions. Blue lines showed their expansion routes. What the aliens saw made them whisper in fear. In just 3 years, humans had moved into 12 different star systems. They had ignored every warning, every diplomatic note, every attempt at negotiation. "They fight differently than any species we have encountered," Veltar continued. "When we defeat their fleets, they do not surrender. When we offer them better terms, they refuse to negotiate. When we show them our superior numbers, they attack anyway." On the far side of the galaxy, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the Pentagon War Room on Earth. The room hummed with activity as officers moved between control stations. Holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship in space. Morrison was 55 years old with gray hair and scars from his time as a fighter pilot. He had been commanding Earth's military response to alien contact for 2 years now. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," reported Lieutenant Collins from the communications station. "Put it on the main screen," Morrison ordered. Chatiu. Message was simple and direct. The Galactic Council demanded that humans withdraw from all contested systems within 72 hours. They offered humans a designated area of space to call their own. They promised trade agreements and peaceful relations. All humanity had to do was stop fighting and accept galactic law. General Lisa Kane walked up beside Morrison. She was younger than the Admiral, but her reputation for tactical brilliance was known throughout human space. She had won the battle of Kepler Station against impossible odds just last month. "What do you think, Lisa?" Morrison asked. Kane studied the alien message for a long moment. "They still don't understand us, do they? They think this is about territory or resources." Morrison nodded slowly. "They think we fight because we want something from them. They can't imagine that we might fight simply because we are human." Back on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council continued their debate. Representative after representative stood to speak. All of them said the same thing. War was wasteful. War was primitive. Civilized species found peaceful solutions to their problems. "Perhaps the humans simply need more time to understand our ways," suggested Ambassador Throne from the Peaceful Union. "They are a young species. They may learn wisdom with age." "They have had 3 years to learn," Veltar replied sharply. "In that time, they have destroyed 47 of our military vessels and occupied 6 mining facilities. They show no signs of becoming more reasonable." The debate went on for hours. Some delegates wanted to send a larger military force to stop human expansion. Others suggested economic sanctions. A few even proposed completely avoiding human space and letting them have whatever they wanted. Finally, High Counselor Marin called for order. She was ancient even by galactic standards. Having served on the Council for over 800 years, her species had helped write the laws that governed peaceful interaction between all civilized worlds. "We will send our final offer," she declared. "If the humans reject peace one more time, we will have no choice but to view them as a threat to galactic stability." On Earth, President Carol Hughes sat in the Oval Office with her top advisors. The alien ultimatum lay on her desk. Secretary of Defense Ryan Phillips argued for accepting the offer. The aliens outnumbered humanity by thousands to one. Fighting them would be suicide. National Security Advisor Tim Bradley agreed. "Madam President, we have analyzed their fleet strength. If they unite against us, we cannot win a traditional war." Hughes looked at the reports. The numbers were clear. Humanity controlled 23 star systems. The Galactic Council controlled over 50,000. Human industrial capacity was a tiny fraction of galactic production. By every logical measure, continued resistance was pointless. "What does Admiral Morrison recommend?" Hughes asked. "The Admiral believes we should reject their offer," Phillips replied. "He says accepting their terms would be the same as surrendering everything that makes us human." Hughes stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see people going about their daily lives. Children playing in parks, workers heading home from their jobs, families gathering for dinner. All of it was possible because brave men and women were willing to fight for it. She turned back to her advisors. "Gentlemen, I have made my decision." The human response went out on all galactic frequencies 12 hours later. It was broadcast from every human colony, every space station, every ship in the fleet. The message was only 8 words long, but it would change the galaxy forever. "Humanity respectfully declines your offer of peace." Across the galaxy, alien delegates stared at their screens in shock. In 10,000 years of galactic history, no species had ever rejected a council peace offer. Some of the older delegates wondered if the translation had been wrong. Others asked their aides to check the message again. But there was no mistake. Humanity had chosen war over peace. They had chosen conflict over cooperation. They had chosen a path that no civilized species would ever take. Ambassador Veltar felt his crystal body pulse with something he had never experienced before. For the first time in his long life, he was afraid. The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted for 3 days straight. Delegates who had served for centuries found themselves in completely unknown territory. Never before had a species rejected their offer of peace. The concept was so foreign that many aliens struggled to understand what it meant. Council Military Coordinator Zixhelm called together the military leaders from dozens of species. The meeting room was filled with beings who had never fought a real war. For most galactic species, military service meant keeping peace and protecting trade routes. The idea of actual combat was something they only read about in ancient history. "Books, show me the human fleet positions again," Zixhelm ordered. His tentacled form shifted nervously as the holographic display updated. General Korth from the Taurian Collective studied the tactical map. "I do not understand their strategy. They spread their forces across multiple systems instead of concentrating them for defense. Any military academy student would know this is wrong." "Perhaps they are not trying to defend," suggested Admiral Voss from the Stellar Navy. "Perhaps they are trying to attack as many targets as possible." The alien military leaders looked at each other in confusion. Attacking multiple targets with limited forces made no tactical sense. It would only result in defeat at every location. Meanwhile, Colonel Amy Foster prepared her forces for the assault on Rigel Station. Her ship, the UHS Ranger, led a small fleet of human destroyers toward the heavily defended mining facility. Intelligence reports showed 3 alien battleships and dozens of support vessels protecting the station. Foster stood on the bridge, studying the enemy positions. Her tactical officer, Commander Pete Davis, shook his head at the odds. "Colonel, they outnumber us 3 to 1. Standard doctrine says we should wait for reinforcements. Foster smiled grimly. Commander, when has humanity ever followed standard doctrine? The human attack began at 0600 hours. Instead of the careful, measured approach that galactic militaries used, Foster's ships charged straight at the alien defensive line. The human vessels weaved and rolled through space, making targeting difficult for the alien gunners. The Taurian defenders had never seen anything like it. Human ships took damage that should have forced them to retreat, but they kept coming. When the UHS Falcon lost its main engines, the crew used emergency thrusters to ram it into an alien cruiser. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire system. Captain Linda Barnes commanded the destroyer UHS Defiant in the thick of the fighting. Her ship had taken multiple hits and was venting atmosphere from 3 different hull breaches. Any reasonable commander would have ordered retreat. Instead, Barnes targeted the alien flagship and pushed her engines to maximum power. Captain, the ship cannot take much more damage, her engineering officer warned. Then we better make this count, Barnes replied. The Defiant slammed into the side of the alien battleship at full speed. The explosion could be seen from Rigel Station 50,000 kilometers away. Both ships were completely destroyed, but the psychological impact on the alien fleet was devastating. The remaining Taurian ships retreated in disorder. For the first time in their history, they had seen an enemy that preferred death to defeat. The concept was so alien to them that several crew members suffered psychological breakdowns and had to be sedated. Back on Earth, Dr. Neil Cooper briefed the Joint Chiefs of Staff on alien psychology. Cooper was humanity's leading expert on xenopsychology, having studied alien cultures for the past decade. Gentlemen, you have to understand how different we are from them, Cooper explained. For most galactic species, war is simply an extension of economics. They fight to gain resources or territory. When the cost becomes too high, they surrender and negotiate. General Kane leaned forward in her chair. But humans don't think that way. Exactly, Cooper replied. For humans, the fight itself has value. We don't just fight to achieve objectives. We fight because fighting is part of who we are. The aliens cannot understand this because no other species in the galaxy thinks this way. Admiral Morrison studied the psychological profiles Cooper had prepared. What happens when they realize we enjoy combat? That's what worries me, Cooper admitted. They have no frame of reference for a species that finds meaning in conflict. To them, we will seem completely insane. The truth of Cooper's words became clear during the Battle of Centauri Outpost. Commander Rick Palmer held the small human colony with only 200 Marines against a full alien invasion force. The attackers had 5,000 soldiers and air support. By every military calculation, the battle should have lasted 6 hours. Palmer's forces held out for 6 weeks. The alien commander, General Hext of the Hegemony Forces, sent surrender demands every day. Each time, Palmer's response was the same. Still here. Send more ammunition. The siege became a nightmare for the alien forces. Human defenders used tactics that made no sense. They would hold positions that had no strategic value. They would launch attacks when they were clearly outnumbered. They would continue fighting even when their position was hopeless. The alien soldiers began to crack under the psychological pressure. Troops that had served for decades without problem started requesting transfers away from human sectors. Some refused to go on patrol. Others developed stress disorders that their medical staff had never seen before. When human reinforcements finally arrived, they found Palmer and 37 survivors still fighting from the ruins of the command center. Palmer was wounded in 4 places but refused medical evacuation until the last alien soldier had retreated. The rescue footage was broadcast across all human networks. Palmer became a hero overnight. But more importantly, the footage was intercepted by alien intelligence services and shown to their military leaders. The reaction was immediate and horrifying. For the first time in galactic history, Military units began refusing deployment to combat zones. The hegemony forces had to implement psychological counseling for soldiers who had never fired a shot in anger but were terrified of facing humans in battle. Ambassador Veltar called another emergency session of the Galactic Council. The Great Chamber was less crowded this time. Several member species had withdrawn their representatives, saying they needed time to reconsider their position. Fellow delegates, Veltar began, we are facing a crisis that threatens the foundation of our civilization. The humans are not fighting a war as we understand it. They are fighting because they want to fight. The assembled aliens shifted nervously. Dr. Kethara, the Council's chief xenobiologist, had prepared a report that chilled everyone who read it. My analysis suggests that humans evolved differently than any known species, Dr. Kethara explained. Most intelligent life develops past the need for conflict. Humans appear to have evolved to find meaning in struggle itself. You are saying they fight because fighting is natural to them? Asked Ambassador Crix. I am saying they fight because not fighting would be unnatural to them, Dr. Kethara replied. Peace to humans may be a form of death. The implications were staggering. Every assumption the Galactic Council had made about intelligent life was being challenged by one small species from a tiny corner of the galaxy. Admiral Morrison's response to the continuing alien confusion was to implement Operation Endless Storm. Instead of trying to win decisive victories, human forces would keep as many conflicts active as possible. The goal was not conquest, but perpetual engagement. Major Julie Clark led the first deep strike mission under the new doctrine. Her reconnaissance force was supposed to gather intelligence behind enemy lines and return. Instead, Clark established a permanent base in alien territory and began raiding supply lines. When alien forces surrounded her position, Clark did not attempt to break out. She fortified the base and sent a message back to Earth. Situation excellent. Request more enemies. The aliens found themselves with a human base in their own territory that they could not dislodge. Every attack was repelled. Every attempt at negotiation was ignored. The humans had created a war zone where none had existed before. Similar incidents began happening across the galaxy. Human forces would establish positions in neutral space and then defend them against all comers. They turned peaceful sectors into battlefields simply by being there. The psychological impact on galactic civilization was immense. Species that had not fought a war in centuries found themselves forced to maintain military readiness. Trade routes became dangerous. Diplomatic missions required armed escorts. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was learning to be afraid. 6 months had passed since humanity rejected the peace offer. The Galactic Council chambers were half empty now. Many species had withdrawn their representatives, choosing to focus on defending their own territories rather than dealing with the human problem. Ambassador Veltar looked out at the sparse assembly. Where once 800 species had gathered, now fewer than 300 remained. The others had lost faith in the Council's ability to handle the crisis. The humans have established permanent military bases in 17 neutral systems, reported Intelligence Director Quintal. They are not trying to claim these systems. They simply occupy them and fight anyone who approaches. The alien delegates listened in growing horror. Creating conflict zones for no strategic purpose was completely beyond their understanding. It violated every principle of civilized behavior. What do they want? Asked Ambassador Throne for the 100th time. Every species fights for something. Territory, resources, trade rights, colonies. What do humans want? Veltar had been asking himself the same question. After months of study, he was beginning to fear the answer. Commander Rick Palmer had become a legend throughout human space. His defense of New Montana Colony was being studied in military academies across Earth. But Palmer himself was already back in combat, leading the garrison on Frontier Station. The station sat on the edge of human space, right next to 3 different alien territories. It had no strategic value and few resources. The only reason for its existence was to provide a target for alien forces to attack. Palmer stood on the observation deck, watching alien ships gather in the distance. The hegemony forces had brought 2 fleets this time. The Stellar Federation had sent their best battle group. Even the Peaceful Nebula Consortium had contributed warships. "They really don't like us, do they?" commented Lieutenant Sarah Walsh, Palmer's second-in-command. "Can you blame them?" Palmer replied. "We keep doing things that make no sense to them. They offer us peace, and we choose war. They outnumber us, and we attack anyway. They try to be reasonable, and we laugh at them." The alien attack began at dawn. Hundreds of ships moved toward Frontier Station in perfect formation. Their tactics were flawless, their coordination superb. By every military standard, the humans should have surrendered immediately. Instead, Palmer activated the station's defense systems and sent a message to the approaching fleets. "Welcome to Frontier Station. Please form an orderly line for processing." The battle lasted 18 hours. Human defensive positions were destroyed one by one. The station's shields failed. Hull breaches appeared throughout the structure. Any reasonable force would have surrendered hours earlier, but Palmer's defenders kept fighting from the wreckage. When the main command center was destroyed, they fought from secondary positions. When those fell, they fought from maintenance tunnels. When the aliens finally boarded the station, they found humans still shooting at them from behind improvised barricades. The aliens won the battle, but the cost was enormous, not in ships or lives, but in psychological damage to their crews. Many alien soldiers refused to enter the station even after the fighting stopped. Others reported nightmares about humans who kept fighting after they should have been dead. Dr. Kethera submitted her final report to the Galactic Council. Her conclusions would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. "Humans do not fight to achieve peace," she wrote. "They fight because fighting gives their lives meaning. War to humans is not a breakdown of civilization. It is civilization's highest expression." The report included disturbing footage from various battle zones. Human soldiers could be seen laughing during firefights. Human commanders issued orders while critically wounded. Human crews sang songs while their ships exploded around them. "They enjoy it," Dr. Kethera told the emergency session. "Humans actually enjoy combat. They find pleasure in conflict that would horrify any civilized species." The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence. The concept was so alien that many of them could not fully process it. A species that enjoyed war was like a species that enjoyed poison or radiation. It defied every natural law of survival. Meanwhile, General Kane was implementing the next phase of human military doctrine. Operation Endless Storm had been a success. Now it was time for something even more ambitious. "We're going to expand the war," Kane announced to her staff. "Every neutral system within 50 light years will have a human presence. Every trade route will have human patrols. Every diplomatic meeting will have human observers." Colonel Amy Foster raised her hand. "General, that will require dividing our forces even further. We'll be spread too thin to defend anything." Kane smiled. "Colonel, we're not trying to defend anything. We're trying to create conflict everywhere. The aliens want peace. We're going to make peace impossible." The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Human forces would establish small bases throughout neutral space. They would not claim territory or interfere with trade. They would simply exist, armed and ready for battle. The psychological effect was immediate. Alien species that had been neutral in the conflict suddenly found themselves forced to choose sides. Trade convoys needed military escorts. Diplomatic ships required armed guards. Peaceful species had to maintain fleets for the first time in centuries. Captain Ron Baker commanded the human outpost at Vega Station. The station controlled nothing and protected nothing. It existed solely to remind everyone in the sector that humans were there and ready to fight. Baker's force consisted of 50 Marines and 2 small patrol ships. The nearest human reinforcements were weeks away. By every military standard, the base was indefensible. When 3 alien fleets arrived to remove the human presence, Baker could have evacuated. He could have negotiated. He could have asked for terms. Instead, he sent a message to the alien commanders. Vega Station is now a combat zone. All approaching vessels will be engaged. Thank you for your cooperation. The siege of Vega Station lasted 3 days. Baker's tiny force held off 300 alien ships through a combination of determination, clever tactics, and sheer bloody-mindedness. When the station's weapons were destroyed, Baker's Marines continued fighting with small arms. When the power failed, they fought by emergency lighting. On the 3rd day, with the station in ruins and only 12 defenders left alive, Baker sent his final transmission. Still here. Still shooting. Send more ammunition. The alien forces finally overran the station, but the cost was devastating. Not in casualties, but in the complete breakdown of alien military morale. Entire crews requested immediate transfer away from human sectors. Some units simply refused orders to engage human forces. The footage of Vega Station's last stand was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Alien civilians watched in horror as humans continued fighting long after any rational being would have surrendered. Children had nightmares about the humans who laughed while dying. President Hughes addressed the United Nations from the rebuilt General Assembly building. Her speech was broadcast to every human colony and intercepted by alien intelligence services throughout the galaxy. My fellow humans, Hughes began, the galaxy has offered us peace, and we have chosen war. They have offered us submission, and we have chosen defiance. They have offered us the chance to be civilized, and we have chosen to remain human. The speech continued for 20 minutes, but one paragraph would be remembered forever. We are not fighting because we hate our enemies. We are fighting because we love the fight. We are not waging war to achieve peace. We are waging war because war is who we are. The galaxy can accept this truth, or it can continue to be surprised by it, but it cannot change it. Across the galaxy, alien leaders watched the speech with growing dread. They were beginning to understand that humanity was not interested in their version of civilization. Humans had their own ideas about what intelligent life should be. Ambassador Veltar called an emergency meeting of the remaining council members. The great chamber that had once housed nearly 1,000 delegates now held fewer than 200. Fellow beings, Veltar said, we face a choice that our civilization has never confronted before. We can continue to fight a species that views fighting as its natural state, or we can find a way to coexist with permanent conflict. The implications were staggering. For 10,000 years, galactic civilization had been built on the principle that all intelligent life eventually chose peace over war. Humanity was proof that this principle was wrong. Some species began demanding that humans be completely destroyed. Others suggested building barriers to keep human space isolated from the rest of the galaxy. A few even proposed abandoning entire sectors rather than risk further contact with humanity. But the most disturbing development was happening among the younger members of traditionally peaceful species. Intelligence reports spoke of alien youth questioning why their societies always surrendered when conflicts became costly. Some even expressed admiration for human courage in the face of impossible odds. The galaxy was changing, and everyone knew that there was no going back to the way things had been before humanity rejected peace. The unity of the Galactic Council was cracking apart. What had started as a simple diplomatic problem had become an existential crisis for galactic civilization. 8 major species had already withdrawn from the alliance completely. Dozens more were threatening to follow. High Counselor Marin called the remaining delegates to order. At 800 years old, she had seen every kind of crisis the galaxy could produce. But nothing had prepared her for this. The economic cost of this conflict is destroying our trade networks, reported Economic Director Yelkan. Shipping costs have increased by 400%. Insurance companies are refusing to cover vessels traveling through sectors with human presence. The numbers were devastating. The galactic economy had been built on the assumption of perpetual peace. Trade routes that had operated safely for centuries now required military escorts. Neutral systems that had served as commerce hubs were becoming war zones. But the economic damage was nothing compared to the psychological cost. Dr. Kethara had submitted reports that kept the council leadership awake at night. Young members of 18 different species are questioning their society's commitment to peace, she reported. They are asking why their ancestors gave up martial traditions. Some are even requesting to observe human military training. The idea of alien youth admiring human combat was terrifying to the council. Their entire civilization was based on the rejection of violence. If that foundation crumbled, everything they had built would collapse. General Kane received the intelligence. Reports about alien defections with grim satisfaction. Human strategy was working better than anyone had hoped. They were not just fighting a military war. They were fighting an ideological war for the future of galactic civilization. Sir, we have a problem, Lieutenant Collins reported to Admiral Morrison. 3 alien species have requested permission to join human military units as observers. Morrison studied the request. The warrior clans of Proxima had been peaceful for 200 years, but their ancestors had been fighters. The young members of their species were curious about human combat methods. What do our xenopsychologists recommend? Morrison asked. Dr. Cooper had been studying the requests carefully. Admiral, I think we should allow it. The more aliens see how we fight, the more they will understand that we cannot be changed. Some might even decide they want to fight alongside us. The first alien observer arrived at Fort Apache, humanity's main training facility. Commander Torval of the Proxima clans was young by his species standards, only 50 years old. His people had once been warriors before joining galactic civilization. Colonel Foster showed Torval around the facility. The alien watched human soldiers training for close combat, learning to operate in hostile environments, practicing tactics that no civilized species would consider. Your people train to accept casualties, Torval observed. Our military training focuses on avoiding losses. Different goals, Foster replied. Your people train to achieve objectives with minimal cost. Our people train to keep fighting no matter what the cost. Torval spent 3 weeks observing human military exercises. What he saw changed his understanding of warfare completely. Human soldiers did not just train to fight. They trained to enjoy fighting. They competed to see who could endure the most hardship. They celebrated courage under fire. When Torval returned to his homeworld, his reports caused a sensation. Young members of the Proxima clans began demanding that their government allow them to train with humans. The older generation was horrified, but they could not stop the growing interest in human military culture. Meanwhile, the Council's desperation led to increasingly extreme measures. They imposed economic sanctions on human space. But human colonies proved remarkably self-sufficient. They attempted diplomatic isolation, but humans seemed to prefer being left alone. Some council members suggested using biological weapons to eliminate humanity entirely. Others proposed building massive defense barriers to contain human expansion. A few even discussed abandoning vast sectors of space rather than risk further contact. But every proposed solution faced the same problem. Humanity was not fighting for territory or resources or political control. They were fighting because fighting was their nature. You could not negotiate with nature itself. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was a human anthropologist who had been captured during a council raid on a research station. During her interrogation, she provided the key insight that the aliens had been missing. You still do not understand, Dr. Mitchell told her captors. You think we are fighting for something. Territory, resources, ideology, revenge. We are not. We are fighting because we are human, and fighting is what humans do. The alien interrogator Captain Hess of Council Intelligence, struggled to process this information. All species fight for objectives. What is your objective? To fight, Dr. Mitchell replied simply. You offered us peace, but you might as well have offered us extinction. Peace, to humans, is not rest. It is death. The interrogation tapes were sent directly to the highest levels of council leadership. Dr. Cathera analyzed Dr. Mitchell's statements for weeks before issuing her final report. Humans do not view war as a means to an end, she concluded. They view war as an end in itself. Fighting is not something they do to achieve goals. Fighting is their primary goal. The implications were staggering. Every assumption the council had made about human motivation was wrong. They had offered humans everything they thought intelligent beings wanted: peace, prosperity, security, trade, territory. But humans did not want any of those things more than they wanted the right to fight for them. Admiral Morrison's strategy evolved to match this new understanding. Operation Endless Storm expanded into something the council found truly horrifying. Humans began actively seeking out new conflicts, expanding the war into sectors that had been neutral for centuries. Commander Beth Torres led a mission that perfectly demonstrated the new human approach. Her task force was supposed to deliver medical supplies to refugees from the fighting. It was a humanitarian mission that should have built goodwill with neutral species. Torres completed the medical delivery exactly as ordered. Then her forces immediately engaged nearby alien military units in fierce combat. The aliens could not understand how the same humans who showed such compassion for refugees could be so brutal toward soldiers. The incident was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Alien civilians watched in confusion as humans helped their wounded enemies and then resumed fighting those same enemies an hour later. The concept of fighting without hatred was completely foreign to them. Captain Ron Baker's defense of Mining Station Echo became another symbol of human determination. The station had no strategic value and few resources. Baker's garrison consisted of 40 Marines with light weapons. When 5 alien fleets arrived to remove the human presence, any rational commander would have evacuated immediately. Baker instead declared the station a free fire zone and invited all comers to test themselves against human defenders. The siege lasted a week. Baker's tiny force held off 500 ships through clever use of the station's mining equipment as weapons. When the aliens finally broke through the defenses, they found Baker and 6 survivors still shooting at them from the reactor room. Baker's final transmission became legendary throughout human space. Echo Station out of ammunition. Switching to harsh language. The psychological impact on alien forces was devastating. Entire fleets began refusing deployment to sectors with human presence. Military units that had served for decades without complaint suddenly developed discipline problems when ordered to engage human forces. The crisis reached its peak when 3 major council species formally requested permission to withdraw from the alliance entirely. The Taurian Collective, the Hegemony Forces, and the Stellar Federation all announced that they could no longer participate in a conflict that was destroying their military morale. Ambassador Veltar realized that the Council faced complete collapse. They were not losing a war against humanity. They were losing their entire civilization to the idea that war might be preferable to peace. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, Veltar requested a direct meeting with human leadership. For the first time since the crisis began, he would speak directly to the species that had brought their galaxy to the brink of chaos. The meeting was arranged on a neutral station in deep space. Veltar arrived with a small diplomatic escort. Admiral Morrison came alone. The 2 leaders sat across from each other in a sparse conference room. Veltar's crystal form caught the light as he struggled to find words for questions that had never been asked before. "What do you want from us?" Veltar finally asked. Morrison's answer would echo through galactic history. "We want you to understand that some species are meant to fight, You built a galaxy based on the assumption that all intelligent life seeks peace. You were wrong. The Admiral continued. We are not asking for your territory or your resources. We are asking for your recognition that war for humanity is not a failure of diplomacy. It is our natural state. Veltar felt something he had never experienced in his long life. For the first time, he understood true fear. Not fear of death or pain, but fear of a universe where his most basic beliefs about intelligent life were. The meeting between Admiral Morrison and Ambassador Veltar lasted 12 hours. When it ended, both leaders knew that the galaxy would never be the same. Veltar returned to Nexus Prime with the terrible knowledge that humanity could not be negotiated with, reasoned with, or changed. The Galactic Council faced a choice that 10,000 years of civilization had not prepared them for. They could continue fighting a species that viewed fighting as its highest calling, or they could accept that their assumptions about intelligent life had been fundamentally wrong. Fellow delegates, Veltar addressed the remaining council members. I have spoken directly with human leadership. They do not want our territory. They do not want our resources. They do not want to rule over us. They want something far more dangerous. They want the right to remain human. The sparse assembly listened in growing dread. Only 150 species remained in the council chambers. The others had either withdrawn completely or were preparing to do so. High Counselor Marin stood slowly. At 800 years old, she had guided galactic civilization through countless crises. But this was different. This challenged everything she believed about the nature of intelligent life. What are you recommending? She asked. Capitulation, Veltar replied. Not military surrender, but philosophical surrender. We must accept that our galaxy will contain a species that rejects our most basic principles. The word sent shockwaves through the assembly. Capitulation was not just military defeat. It was the admission that their entire way of life had been proven inadequate. Meanwhile, humanity was preparing for what Admiral Morrison called the final offensive. But this was not an attempt to achieve decisive military victory. It was an operation designed to make the philosophical point that humanity would never accept galactic civilization as it existed. General Kane commanded the operation from the UHS Defiance, a massive battleship that had been built specifically for this moment. Around her, the entire human fleet prepared for simultaneous attacks on military targets throughout the galaxy. Our goal is not to destroy their forces, Kane explained to her commanders. Our goal is to demonstrate that we can fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. We want them to understand that there is no corner of the galaxy where they can hide from the reality of human nature. The attacks began at precisely 1200 hours Galactic Standard Time. Human forces struck military installations in 47 different systems simultaneously. The attacks were not designed to capture territory or destroy infrastructure. They were designed to create permanent combat zones where none had existed before. Captain Linda Barnes led the assault on the Hegemony Naval Academy. The facility trained young aliens in the arts of peacekeeping and defensive warfare. It had not seen combat in over 3 centuries. Barnes's small fleet attacked the Academy's orbital defenses with typical human ferocity. When her flagship was critically damaged, she used it to ram the main defensive platform. Both structures exploded in a fireball that could be seen from the planet's surface. The symbolism was perfect. Humanity had literally crashed into the galaxy's most prestigious center of peaceful military doctrine. At the same time, Major Julie Clark established a permanent human base in the heart of neutral space. Clark's force consisted of 200 Marines and enough supplies to last 6 months. Their orders were simple. Stay and fight anyone who approached. Welcome to Firebase Determination, Clark announced on all frequencies. We are now accepting challenges from any species that believes they can remove us. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. 3 alien species immediately surrounded the human base with their entire fleets, but they did not attack. They could not bring themselves to assault a position that the humans clearly wanted to defend. The siege of fire-based determination became a galactic media sensation. Millions of aliens watched as human Marines calmly went about their daily routines, while surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces. The humans seemed genuinely happy to be in such a hopeless situation. President Hughes delivered what became known as the Humanity Speech from the steps of the rebuilt Capitol building. The address was broadcast throughout human space and intercepted by every alien intelligence service in the galaxy. "My fellow humans," Hughes began, "today we have proven something that the galaxy did not want to believe. We have proven that intelligence and civilization do not require the rejection of our warrior nature. We have proven that peace is not the highest goal of intelligent life. We have proven that some things are worth fighting for forever." The speech continued for 30 minutes, but the closing words would be remembered for centuries. "We did not choose to be different from the rest of the galaxy. We were born different. We will die different. And in between birth and death, we will fight different. The galaxy can accept this truth and learn to coexist with permanent conflict, or it can continue to be surprised by the reality of human nature, but it cannot change us." The final blow to galactic morale came from an unexpected source. Commander Torval of the Proxima clan submitted his resignation from the Galactic Fleet and requested permission to join human forces permanently. "I have seen what warriors can be," Torval wrote in his resignation letter. "My people forgot this truth when we joined galactic civilization. The humans have reminded us what we lost when we chose peace over honor." Torval was not alone. Young members of dozens of species began requesting transfers to human military units. The Council tried to prevent these defections, but they could not stop the growing fascination with human military culture. The breaking point came when the warrior clans of Proxima formally withdrew from the Galactic Council and requested a military alliance with humanity. Their declaration was broadcast throughout the galaxy. "We choose the path of eternal struggle over the path of eternal peace. We choose the right to fight over the comfort of submission. We choose to stand with the humans who have shown us that strength and honor are not primitive concepts to be discarded, but eternal truths to be embraced." Within hours, similar declarations came from 5 other species. The Galactic Alliance that had maintained peace for 10,000 years was disintegrating as member species chose sides in a conflict between 2 completely different visions of what intelligent life should be. Ambassador Veltar called the final emergency session of the Galactic Council. Only 93 species remained in the Alliance. The great chamber that had once housed nearly 1,000 delegates now echoed with emptiness. "Fellow beings," Veltar said, "we face the end of our civilization as we have known it. We can continue to fight a war we cannot win against an enemy that does not want to defeat us, or we can accept a new reality." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, the Council formally recognized another species' right to reject their core principles. The Galactic Accords were signed 6 months later on a neutral station in deep space. The treaty divided the galaxy into 2 zones: Council space, where traditional galactic law applied, and contest space, where species could engage in permanent conflict with willing opponents. Admiral Morrison and Ambassador Veltar signed the treaty together. The moment was broadcast throughout the galaxy, marking the end of the age of universal peace and the beginning of something unprecedented. "What have we done?" Veltar asked as he watched human forces establishing combat training facilities throughout contest space. Morrison smiled grimly. "We have given the galaxy a choice it never wanted to make. Some species will choose the safety of peace. Others will choose the freedom of conflict. Both paths are now possible." The long-term consequences became clear over the following years. Contest space attracted not just humans and their allies, but young members of traditionally peaceful species who wanted to test themselves against worthy opponents. Ancient warrior traditions that had been suppressed for millennia began to resurface. Council. Space remained committed to peaceful resolution of conflicts, but it was smaller and less influential than before. The galaxy's most dynamic and creative species gradually migrated to contest space, where they could pursue excellence through struggle. Humanity had achieved something no military conquest could have accomplished. They had forced the galaxy to acknowledge that intelligence came in many forms, and that not all intelligent life sought the same goals. The final scene took place on Earth, where children attended schools that taught both diplomatic negotiation and combat tactics. They learned to value both peace and war, both cooperation and competition, both mercy and strength. These children would grow up in a galaxy where conflict was no longer seen as a failure of civilization, but as one possible expression of it. They would inherit a universe where the choice between peace and war was a matter of personal philosophy, not universal law. Humanity had rejected peace not because they hated it, but because they refused to accept it as the only path for intelligent life. In doing so, they had given the galaxy something it had never possessed: true choice about what it meant to be civilized. The age of universal peace was over. The age of chosen conflict had begun, and somewhere in the depths of space, human children learned that some fights were worth having, some struggles gave life meaning, and some truths were worth defending forever.